Hello lovelies, there's something that's been on my mind for a while, and the minds of many of the people that I regularly correspond with on my Discord and elsewhere, and that is audience capture. So that's when a commentator, a YouTuber, even a news anchor, whatever, it can be at any scale, but they become captured by their audience, in that their audience becomes the force that's leading the conversation and ends up shaping the content that they're creating, rather than them leading the conversation and leading the people to talk about whatever. I mean, to some extent this is inescapable because you're trying to appeal to an audience, and when you find something that appeals to that audience, you know, you want to keep doing it because that's where the success is, right? So ideally what you want to do and what your audience wants to see will be in some kind of synergy. But there are instances in which someone becomes fully captured by their audience. Their audience demands a certain kind of content, and they are basically not allowed to stray outside of that, and the incentives to stay within that, regardless of anything else that's going on, become overwhelmingly powerful. And people are used to the idea that someone like, say, Tucker Carlson might mislead their audience and lead their audience on a particular path, propagandizing in that way. But the idea of audience capture, the reverse of that, it's something we used to talk about back in like 2014, 15, 16, but wasn't really talked about on any wider scale. But now people seem to be talking about it more. I don't think I'm audience captured. Whenever I think I'm too popular, I say something that I know is going to piss off some of the people who watch me. I know it's perverse and contrarian, but I think it keeps me honest. But I find that I have gradually drifted away from a lot of blogs and YouTube channels and other things that I used to follow. You know, people who were part of the same milieu, the for want of another term, the anti-SJW type people, the Gamergate people, you know. And there were quite a lot of those people that I followed both before and after Gamergate, where we agreed at least on a more socially and creatively libertine and liberal, in the small L sense, sort of tack, where we were protesting censorship, protesting corruption, those sorts of things. But over time, many of those same people appear to have become right-wing hacks, outrage merchants of the same but opposite type that they used to criticize. And if there's one thing that really always pisses me off, it's hypocrisy. Now, a lot of people have taken this rightward trend amongst a lot of these people as being an aha, you see, we were right, Gamergate was right wing all along, we were right about the chuds or whatever. But I don't think that's it. I think it's more to do with audience capture and echo chambering and echo prisons. I've described those variously before, I won't go over it again, but basically an echo prison is where you're forced into an echo chamber that's not of your own making. You express a view that is outside the acceptable terms. You have a 1% different view than everyone else, and so you end up shoved into the same box as bigots, and so you can't help but somewhat conform to their views over time. So I think it's more to do with audience capture. I think it's more to do with other complications. I think it's to do with how the algorithms that determine search results and so on these various social platforms, it's to do with all that and a whole bunch of other things as well. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be willing to change your mind and that your ideology and your viewpoints can't shift over time, But when that happens, it usually feels more organic and genuine, kosher, you might say. And another instance is it doesn't feel organic or natural or kosher or in keeping with your older points of view. So you could call this kind of rightward shift, you could call it Rubenesque when it's more egregious, or canvassing, perhaps you might call it. Now, not everyone's done it, of course, but those people who showed a little bit more integrity and consistency do seem to have been punished either by their audience or their algorithms, monetarily or otherwise. So it's easy to see why people get captured, why people keep pushing in the same vein, why they become more extreme, why they become outrage mongers, and so on. I think people like Just Some Guy and Jeff Holiday and Wizard of Cause, though he doesn't do that much anymore, or Noel Plum, those guys have kept to their own course to one degree or another. There's some kind of other vaccine drama going on with some of them, but they seem to have kept to their own ideals, and regardless what anyone who watched them thought, and that's commendable, and should be supported, I think. But you can compare them with, I mean, there's lots of options I could choose. These are just the ones that came to mind. I don't mean to pick on them particularly, but if you can compare them to, say, Sargon of Akkad, or Godless Spellchecker, or the Honey Badgers, something has happened in those three instances which doesn't feel organic, which doesn't feel good, which doesn't feel right, which doesn't feel consistent. I mean, Sargon started out as a left-of-centre liberal, just railing against overreach and censorship that was coming from an inaccurate term, but the political left, we shall say. And his channel, for whatever reason, took off on that basis, but a lot of the people that liked what he had to say were libertarian economically as well as otherwise, and somehow he ended up with an audience to the right of where he was, and that rapidly devolved into caricature, with him standing for UKIP and spouting half-baked nonsense. But, you know, the guy's a family, he needs money, integrity costs money, right? So it might just be a coldly cynical decision, but it doesn't feel natural, it doesn't feel organic, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't seem in keeping or consistent with where he started, right? Even accounting for the amount of time that has passed. And I'm sure some echo prisoning is going on there. If we look at Godless Spellchecker, it's been a pretty good, calm, rational voice for many years, but he seems to have been entirely captured deep in the turf waters, hanging out and questioning people at various turf speaking events at Speaker's Corner and so on, repeating turf talking points, not particularly challenging the points of view of either side. He seems to have been very much captured there by his audience, and I'm sure that getting involved in that debate on one particular side is lucrative and tempting, but I'm not sure that he's maintained his objectivity and distance in a way that someone like Noel Plum has, and I think he's cut a very ethical, balanced and well thought out path through things, as opposed to Godless Spellchecker. The Honey Badgers, I used to have a great deal of sympathy for. I've never styled myself a men's rights activist, but I am concerned about men's issues such as mental health for obvious reasons. And they were always a more moderate voice. I never particularly liked Paul Elam, but he had this philosophy that just being controversial is good. It draws attention. If you say something outrageous, then you're going to draw people to you. They're going to see what you have to say because of this outrageous thing, this clickbait, and then they'll see the other things that you're on about that perhaps have a bit more merit. And you know, it works to an extent, so you can't blame people entirely. And when you're an activist, right, you want to be heard. And I think that this is why so many activists, from PETA to trans activists to anti-trans activists to ardent feminists to men's rights activists, I think that's why they become so annoying over time, why they become so insufferable, because it's anything for attention, whether it's a good idea or not. And to me, that is where the honey badgers and other men's rights activists have descended into. They've taken the Paul Elam philosophy too far to heart, and because they've had sympathy from one political wing, they have doubled down on appealing to that political wing to try and get some kind of progress on their agendas, many of which are actually good. Same could be said for feminism, the other way around. But in so doing, they seem to have lost their heart, lost their soul, become something different, become captured by that slightly more sympathetic right-wing audience, to the point where they now express much more right-wing views than you would expect from egalitarians, ultimately. So that's what I think's going on, and that's what I'm constantly conscious of. And there are various aspects of this that worry me. You know, it is not financially and socially viable to be consistent morally and ethically. That's bad. that's really bad. And blocking people and cutting them off just puts them in echo prisons with other people you find socially unacceptable. And then a natural realignment sort of occurs there. That's bad. That's wrong. That's dangerous. That worries me as well. So, yeah, I never want to be in an echo chamber. I never want to be controlled by my audience. So you're going to have to put up with me being obnoxious and contrarian from time to time. But this also relates to something else that I'm seeing going on. There are a lot of people in my regular circles who are becoming not just put out, not just annoyed, not just peeved, but genuinely vicious and nasty to various sorts of people, or are perpetuating misapprehensions about political ideologies or sexualities or identification and so on, right? And it's understandable why they're angry, why they're upset, why they feel victimized, because they are being victimized. But it is getting deeply uncomfortable for me, right? These are people who I know aren't normally vicious or cruel or nasty, don't normally perpetuate falsehoods. But there is COVID conspiracy ideas there, perhaps because they're no longer being challenged so much in the mainstream. There is anti-trans sentiment. Excuse me. And ultimately, these are just people who want to be left alone to live their way, same as you do. There isn't grooming going on. Drag Queen Story Hour is just panto. What are you so upset about? It doesn't matter. Leave them alone. Do as you would be done by. You know, it's who cares, really. But I see people being vicious, being nasty, coming together with other people who have been slighted or falsely accused of bigotry or whatever, but then they get preyed upon or get channeled into these right-wing audiences that they're not really at home with either. But I don't want them to get captured the same way. And guys, if I ran into you and I didn't know you and you were expressing a lot of these views, I would just block or mute you and move on. And I'm not someone who normally blocks or mutes people easily. So don't be like Sargon and others. Don't take the easy path. Right? I know it pays better and it's more visible and you'll get more success online if you do, but at the end of the day, the only person you have to be able to live with is yourself. So let your own conscience guide you and your better angels, because this isn't you, this viciousness, this nastiness. This is visiting back upon people what has been done to you, and that never feels like a good idea to me. So yeah, bit of a ramble, and sorry about the coughing, but yeah, I'm just I don't like seeing good people become bad people, even if I understand the reasons. Zang.
Satana Station is an addition to Machinations of the Space Princess. It's a whole sleazy space station, full of locations, services, adventures and inspiration for your old school space opera games. Over 100 locations, a bevy of non-player characters, and more plot hooks than you can shake an Arcturan mega stick at. Buy it at post-mort.com, drive-through RPG, and hard copy at lulu.com.
Get some plastic surgery against this society. Entropy, apathy, morality, totality. Makeup of your final days. Survival of the fittest haze. Might is right on, bite on praise. Smoke and mirrors, twisted maze. Are you strong